Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Rain Taxi virtual event featuring J. Michael Strozinski. I'm Eric Lorber, the director of Rain Taxi. If you don't yet know about our organization, we are a nonprofit that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. Our work revolves around a quarterly magazine of critical writing. I'm holding up our summer issue, and if you would like to hold it too, we would love to mail you a copy. Check out our website anytime after today's event to see if you might be interested in getting one or becoming a Rain Taxi member and getting a bunch. Another way we advocate for literary writing is through events like this. Tonight's event, like most of ours, is free to attend, but if you're able to pitch in a little something, please use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. We're privileged to receive funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Minnesota State Arts Board, among other places. But our most vital supporters are individual people like you. There are many other ways you can participate tonight. There is the chat. We see a bunch of you are already chiming in, and that's great. Keep it coming. There's a separate Ask a Question box. So if you have a question for Joe, put it in there, and we'll make sure to get to those before we wrap up tonight. And then finally, my favorite is the Buy the Book button. And if you use that tonight, you'll be taken right to the ordering page for Together We Will Go at our partner bookseller, Majors and Quinn, here in Minneapolis. And while you're there, if there are other books you would like, you can just stay there and keep buying. One that you might like is another book by J. Michael Strozinski that just came out last month, Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer. We might chat a little bit about that if we have time. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's a few years old now, but it's one of my favorite memoirs, Joe's book, Becoming Superman. So just a few examples of things that you could pop in to the search engine if you decide to make a book purchase tonight. Meanwhile, I want to welcome our guest, J. Michael Strozinski. Of course, if you're here, you know that he is the, an incredibly prolific author. If you read comics or watch television or see movies, you have probably experienced his mellifluous writing. Again, we'll try to touch on some of the specifics of those, but if I started listing them, we'd be here all day. And I really want to get to this new one. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. I didn't know I did mellifluous writing. I know I've done peripatetic writing and ubiquitous writing, but never mellifluous. And I have to go now. I've really received the highest praise I can receive. So where can we go from here, really?
Oh, no, we're going to work on it. But let's do that by jumping right in because, well, actually, let's talk a little bit about that prolific nature of yours. And I'm just always curious when someone who is deft in multiple forms, how do you decide? How do you even, direct an idea toward a given format, whether it's going to be a television series or a longer script or a novel? What goes on in your brain that makes you pick a form? And if you want to keep going, what led you to write this particular novel?
What goes on in my head is a bucket of snakes. I'm not sure we want to particularly go there. But most times the story, when it first appears, tells me what it is. I think that the writing process or any form of art, really, you have to surrender to what it is that you're doing and just listen to what it says to you. And if a story idea comes and it says, I'm a movie or I'm a TV show or I'm a novel or I'm a short story, I go where I'm kicked. And these things direct themselves. As far as where this came from, where Together We Will Go came from, I've lost a lot of people to suicide over the years, like a lot. So apparently I'm a carrier, and I wanted to sort of understand for myself the dynamic of that and what it means and there are some people who have, one could argue, have legitimate reasons for having those thoughts, others less so. And I wanted to explore the decision-making process from all kinds of different directions, because I have other friends who have, seriously thought about it or attempted it. And what I discovered is that in almost every case, the person was ambushed by the suicidal impulse. They didn't think that they were susceptible to it. So when it came, they were ambushed and almost did or did do terrible things. And because there are so many different approaches to the question and the reason why people do it here, it becomes almost like an inoculation against suicide, because you've now experienced all those different reasons people do things and what that trigger moment is. So when and if it should come to you, you're prepared for it. It's like getting, again, a vaccination. And I think that it will, in some ways, help to diminish that problem. And for me personally, like I said, it was just the emotion of dealing with my own losses over the years. There are some parts of the book that are based on people that I've known and people that I've lost. Writers write what gets caught in their filter. And this is one that has been building in me for a long time. I wanted to write this book for a very long time, but I didn't have the tools in my toolbox yet to write it. And 2 years ago, I thought, okay, do I have it there or not? And I said, well, let's find out. And then wrote the book. And here we are.
Wow. Yeah, I want to actually say, well, thank you in a way, because I'm really grateful when artists tackle a hard to talk about subject. Because that's the whole, we get down that when something is hard to talk about, we don't talk about it. And then we suffer more from lack of talking about it. So I'm really grateful when people face that or defeat that impulse to not think about it. But also to remind people that art about a topic isn't an endorsement of it or something like that. It's not a glorification of it. And your book, like many these days, gives a reminder at the end. And I actually want to read it. I thought it was one of the most beautifully written ones. And I want to put it in the chat too, because it's just such an important message. And you say, "Together We Will Go" is an examination of the intense feelings that often underlie suicidal ideation and depression. If you sometimes find yourself experiencing similar feelings and wish to speak with someone who understands, please contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And again, I want to thank you for not only writing a hard-to-write book, but for putting that reminder out there.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I think that literature has to go into dangerous places sometimes to do anything worthwhile. And coming from a background, my first degree is in clinical psychology. The first thing they teach you in this subject matter is, if you're having those kind of thoughts, talk about it to someone. And the talking about it can diffuse it in many cases. And the book is designed kind of to be a starting point in that conversation. It was my first time. I'm going to write a novel over the next couple of years. People were assuming about an action story, a big story, and a genre story. And I said, no, it's going to be about suicide, which is a dangerous topic to begin with, because I'll probably get hammered by those who think I'm condemning it or condoning it, which it's neither. And I'm doing it in an epistolary format, which was mainly used in the 18th to 19th centuries. And so the book is made completely out of risk for me. But I think that unless you're willing to go where the story takes you and be dangerous as a storyteller, then why are you doing it?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you noted that the book is written in the epistolary form, which in your case, you really take full advantage of. I felt it was an updating of that tradition because here we have texts and emails between people, voice transcriptions, and really the key thing, the journal writings of the people who are taking this trip together. Yeah, I just thought bringing in those contemporary media was a really smart way that we could eavesdrop on all of these people, and a great reminder that we're really sometimes different people depending on who we're talking to and how we're doing it.
Exactly. And we're also different people. We're talking just to ourselves. And doing it in this format allowed me to dive deep into each person's individual thoughts and things that they wouldn't necessarily say to anyone while they were still around. One of my favorite novels of the past is Dracula by Bram Stoker. And in about half of it is written in epistolary form in terms of letters and telegrams and journal and diary entries. And what was cool about the book was that you could tell who was speaking within a couple of lines. I thought, that's masterful writing. I wonder if I can do something even somewhere near there. So that every single entry has to sound different from everybody else. If you're writing a novel in normal narrative form, you only have to get one voice really right, and then his interpretations of everyone else. But doing it from 12 different points of view, each voice has to be distinct. Each voice has to really let you into their thought processes and their emotions. And there are some of the characters who are keeping secrets from others. There's a character named Peter who is gung-ho for this whole thing on the outside, but on the inside he has doubts. He isn't sure about all this. And that contrast adds, I think, to the drama. Oh,
absolutely does. I was reflecting on, well, what a cohesive and successful book it is as a novel. And just thinking, I'm not surprised to hear you say it really called out to you to be a novel and not be another form, because it truly feels that way. And it led me to think, oh, most of your writing, or a huge amount of your writing, is in a much more episodic format, installment by installment. And then I was like, oh, epistle, episode, are they related? Turns out they're not related. That's Greek for you. But it did strike me as kind of two different ways that you tend to approach a project, maybe.
Yeah, I wanted to do a cohesive story in almost episodic sense, I guess you could call it that. But for what I feel is that where novels work is that they are primarily interior, where movies and TV work is they're primarily exterior. You rarely get to the person's thoughts. And in a novel, you really can't see the exterior. I have it described to you. And for something as sensitive and important, the discussions we're having now, it had to be internal. So I knew from the get-go this could not be anything other than a novel.
Right. Now, in addition to the epistolary tradition, it seemed to me you were kind of invoking a whole range of novelistic traditions, the picaresque, the road novel, the traveler's tales. I mean, even back as far as Canterbury Tales or something. And then contemporary things like, the famous bus rides of our era, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. So it seemed to me you were plugging into all of these traditions. How did those filter in for you, or any of those felt like special to you, or a challenge for you, or did you have other models for that?
I'm kind of a literary mutt in terms of my influences. So yes, I read Chaucer. I know those stories really well. I love road stories. I grew up on the stories of the 60s that were also like, the electric Kool-Aid acid test and others. And as a kid, I moved all the time. I moved every 6 months or so, growing up across the country. And I like stories that let me look at the country as well as the story about the characters. When I did Sense8, every country was as much a character in the story as the characters themselves. And I wanted to do the story partly to examine the places and how they interact with what our story is, and to also comment upon the fact that suicide knows no boundaries. It knows there are no state lines or national lines or international lines. It is in America, it's a national problem. Suicide is the #2 cause of death among young people right now. Yeah. And that happens in Virginia as much as it does in California, as much as it does in Alabama. So I thought, let's take a broad stroke approach to this and really take this across the country.
Yeah, that cross country journey, and again, it's something I think a lot of writers gravitate. I seem to remember. I think it was Midnight Nation where there's kind of a cross country motif in it, but when you bring up how universal the problem is, and you're right, at the same time, I was startled to learn and then reflect upon that state by state laws are different and approaches are different. And maybe that's part of the problem, is that there isn't a cohesive approach to the problem in our country. But it becomes part of the plot, actually, in your book. And how did you discover all it? Did you have to dive into that sort of legal research? Or?
Yeah, I want to explore the fact that we do have different rules. They start off in areas where it's not considered illegal, but then they get caught in areas where it is illegal. And even just being together to do this, they are committing a felony. And we need to really address how we view suicide in ways that will help it rather than hinder it, in terms of getting people to need the help that they need. It's the fact that for most of human history, suicide wasn't considered a crime. It was something that happened, but they didn't, penalize you or your family or anyone else. It was really in England. I think it's in the book, but I think it's like 17th century, somewhere along those lines, where they made it illegal, and the crime they accused you of, if you tried to commit suicide, was depriving the king of a subject. Right. Because the state owns you. You don't own you, the state owns you. And that provided the foundation as we get more and more into the whole question of legal and illegal suicide. And you're right, we need to have a cohesive approach to this thing that allows us to have people who are considering these things speak about it more openly and potentially receive the help that they need. Yeah.
And again, I think I believe novels and art can be a part of that conversation and can really lead to social change. When you brought up Sense8, which I love, and I think so many people do, and again, it's another thing you're really renowned for, is how so much of your work deals with fairly large ensembles, where there are a lot of characters, and we really have to pay attention to, and they all sort of have to be fleshed out for the whole thing to work. So yeah, I was just curious about the huge variety of characters who get on this bus, and were any of them particularly challenging to write? I mean, one senses they're all kind of aspects of yourself or people or so forth, but they're also different, and that it produces a really good outcome, because we feel like, wow, this is not a knee-jerk thing. It's everyone has a different approach to this.
Thank you. Yeah, all of them except for one are in their mid-20s approximately. The one character is much older, and for me, writing that group of that demographic was not challenging, but it was a great chance to dive deep into what I think is the current culture. One thing that happens very often to people in general when they get into their 50s or thereabouts, or 60s, or get older in any event, they start to calcify, they fossilize, they stop listening to new music, they make the same jokes, the same cultural references they made 20 years ago, and they stop. I think that as an artist, you have to stay current and fresh at all times. If you have nothing new on your playlist beyond 10 years, if you don't have a playlist, you don't know what a playlist is, there's something wrong. You need to reconsider your life. So I've kept current and fresh, and the starship's taken some damage, but internally I'm still kind of that demographic. And I think that the millennials and the Gen Zs have gotten a real bad rap. That's an unnecessary one. I think that they are the ones who I think are going to make a huge difference in the world, and I think hope to undo some of the damage that those who preceded them have inflicted upon the planet and the culture. And in terms of just then diving into those minds and those personalities, they kind of form themselves. It's the weirdest thing. I said it before, you don't make art happen, you let art happen. And once for instance, when they stop in our second stop is to pick up a couple of different people, and one of them has Eisenmenger's syndrome, which causes the skin to be blue from lack of oxygen. And I hadn't planned on that. I had Lisa come up first. I'm writing it all down. Character turns, and my fingers wrote he was blue. Like, where the hell did that come from? And I had to go research what would cause that to happen. And oh, there is actually a syndrome for that. It's the darndest thing. Characters take on their own lives. If you give them the proper room to grow and the respect and the individuality, they just become who they are.
Yeah, I know it's an old saw that they tell you, what they need, but it's kind of thrilling to hear from a writer that it's actually true. Also, by the way, about Tyler, I thought it was a fantastic tribute to your identification as a science fiction writer. A few people over the past weeks have said, "Oh, is it a science fiction novel?" And I've said no, although there is a character with blue skin. So nice move. Yeah, and to me, it was another reminder that people are inherently interesting. I mean, that is, I would imagine that is a gift to a novelist, to just be, the more you get to know them, the more interesting they become. And in this case, I kind of wondered if you had set yourself the challenge of making them lovable, sort of despite what they've decided to do. Because, man, I really fell in love with some of these characters. And so it's, just, again, just to, tell us a little bit more about the challenge there. Yeah.
Fortunately, I come from a background as a reporter. That's how I started initially writing. And you learn how to do character sketches in a few words here and there and dig into who those people are. And in the course of the book, there are a number of characters who start off just garden variety annoying. You want them to get off the bus. You want to drop them down a sewer as soon as humanly possible, and end up falling in love with them by the end of the story. And I've always believed in the nobility and the glory of the human race as a whole, that we're better than we think we are, nobler than we know. I think we all have the potential to be lovable if we are allow that to happen, if we are gentle of spirit and open to the better angels of our nature. So for me, even the most annoying characters, by the end become lovable. The only person in this entire thing who was not lovable is me. I've never been lovable. It's just one of those things. I accept it.
And the writer character who gets the gang together here is in a way the most suspect, and yet even he is we empathize, I think, and that is again, I think, an important part of what's happening. If we're going to understand these people and why they've chosen to do what they do, it's important to do that with respect and with empathy. The other thing I've been finding myself telling people is that despite what we think of as the heavy subject matter, the book is just filled with beauty, and really pays attention to, I think people expect, like, oh, we're going to hear these people's kind of complaints or rationalizations or their depressive mind state. And we certainly hear their reasons, but we also experience them as people who are able to experience the beauty of the world. And I want to tell our audience, I know you have asked not to read any passages, but I want to read a passage because I just think your prose is so fantastic. And one of the moments that really struck me was when one of the travelers is has found their way to a museum, and it turns out the museum is having a certain exhibition of paperweights. Is this okay if I read this, Jeff?
Absolutely. If you can handle it, I can handle it.
And she's thinking, what could be so amazing about paperweights? But they were beautiful. Hundreds of glass spheres containing butterflies and flowers and swirls of color like little galaxies. Others were shaped like crystal hammers, owls, cats, purses, tiny glass shoes, figurines. I smiled as I walked down the row of glass cabinets, taking in their beauty. Not just beauty, trivial beauty. A paperweight was designed to do one thing: keep pieces of paper from blowing away. Literally, a thing to put on top of a thing. You could use a rock to do that, or your keys, or a pen, or a million other mundane everyday items. Instead, someone decided to create little moments of beauty to do the simplest, smallest job in the world. Because why shouldn't that be beautiful? For some reason, that thought made me ridiculously happy. By the time I got back to the bus, everyone else was already on board, waiting for me. We were starting to get worried, Dylan said and grinned at me. You okay? I'm good, I said. And I was. I just thought that was an amazing insight into Karen's world, even though she's in incredible pain.
Thank you. And for me, it's important that characters are never just one thing, that they're not defined by any one particular thing or one particular emotion. And even though they don't really change that much over the course of the story, the more you learn about why they are the way they are, the more you begin to sympathize with them, even if you don't want to. And one thing I've discovered in my own arc as a writer is that I started out all about plot and story and technology, and just the craft-worthy elements of that, and then worked my way slowly up to, no, it's not about the plot, it's about the characters as plot. And then I got really good character stories going. Well, that's kind of what it is, but it's also more than that. It's about the search for truth. And I began moving my work toward finding truth in storytelling. And what I've landed most recently is that it's about beauty, about beauty in storytelling, beauty in apprehension, beauty in life. Because if you do the beauty right, the truth and the character and everything else falls into place. And it's the hardest thing to explain to anyone without sounding really corny about it. But if you can get there, it changes how you view the storytelling and how you view the world. And so for me, having those moments of beauty in the story was incredibly important, because beauty uplifts and ennobles us in all kinds of ways. I was talking to, a while back for research, the grandson of one of the guys who built the concentration camps and designed them in World War II. And so there were two primary rules. One, that once you were outside the barracks, there was nowhere you could hide from the towers. You could be seen by somebody at all times. And two, that there could not be any beauty anywhere, because beauty leads to hope and hope leads to insurrection. And so for me, the apprehension of beauty and the creation of beauty is kind of where I'm trying to get to now as a writer.
Wow, that's a rough story, and powerful, because it's true. I want to thank you also for risking being corny. I wish more people would do it, because yeah, that is. I mean, aren't we all trying to get there? We talked a little bit about, I don't know, some of the research in terms of like how the government deals with suicide and where our culture is at with it. Was there anything else to get into these, these various mindsets and even approaches, the things your characters talk about And I ask only because I want to remind folks you're the author of this amazing memoir, Becoming Superman. One thing I think that you showed in this is, you know, just how straight you can look at some really hard stuff and talk about it. So again, I want to thank you for that. And I'm not trying to be too personal, but I think it's so important that you've really gone into these people's mindset.
Thank you. I think that it's so important to go into those spaces and not be afraid of them, and to talk about hard things in easy ways, if that makes any sense. Because when you do that, you take the teeth out of it. You know, as long as you're unwilling to talk about it, or you talk about it in hushed terms, or I have to adjust the light, pardon me. Moment, it just keeps flickering on and off. There we go. Or in ways that give it undue power, then that topic or that event owns you and owns a discussion. And the moment you can talk about it in ways that are light, or at least not overwhelmed, then you can do something about it.
Yeah, yeah. And talk about it even as a concept is, I think, inherently brings up, you know, the dialogue and the relationship, that the beauty that you were speaking about formerly is really grounded upon. I want to tell folks that one of the amazing moments in this book is it's worth the price of admission, as far as I'm concerned, is when you tell the reader of this book, who presumably is interested in becoming a writer or staying a writer, and you say, you know, hand this book to your significant other because I want to talk to them for a while. And just that real feeling that you are really speaking one-on-one to your reader, that feels like maybe something that happened on that journey from plot to beauty. Is dialogue something that has become increasingly important for you?
Dialogue between people in terms of the work?
The characters, yeah.
In the characters, certainly, yeah. It's letting them speak openly, honestly, and truthfully. In the chapter you mentioned in the writing book, there are so many writing books that are just theoretical or dry, and I wanted this to be an open letter to aspiring writers, much in the way that Together We Will Go is a love letter to the upcoming generation and to what they are capable of doing. In terms of going back to the becoming a writer passage you mentioned, the path of the writer is quite difficult and quite solitary. Hunter Thompson described it as the dead end loneliness of the person who lives by their own rules. And relationships are terribly difficult because if you are honest as an artist of any kind, you must be willing to say that the work will always come first. And that is probably the hardest thing to understand when you're on the other end of that sentence. But it is so necessary to communicate that. So I wanted to do a part of the book that was not to or about the writer, but to the person the writer cares about. Mm-hmm. Say, let me explain to you what you have hooked up with. You could have gotten involved with a serial killer or a corrupt politician, but you picked a writer. I'm sorry. Even worse. And here's how you can make that relationship work and not make the errors that I personally had made over the years. Apparently, what I've heard from people who've read it, that section has meant quite a lot to them. Oh, good.
I want to bring up a question from the audience. I think maybe we've queued it up actually pretty well. Folks are asking, with all these characters, this fairly large ensemble, and they're kind of growing in relationships, interactions, dialogues. Did you, as you were composing the books, did you kind of do that straight through, or did you find yourself writing a, individual character story and then kind of weaving them together later? Yeah.
I'm incapable of jumping back and forth. I have to go linear. And what I discovered too is one person's entry but sometimes set the tone thematically or story-wise for somebody else's piece. So they can't feel disconnected. They have to feel like they're hinging off of each other in a logical progression. And I was discovering the story along with the characters. I didn't want to go too far down the road in some cases, because you can't surprise an audience unless you're going to be surprised yourself as a writer. So I wanted to leave room, again, for them to tell me what they wanted to do and what they wanted to be, and that required writing it completely in sequence and letting them unfold as they go.
Awesome. Yeah. It's so interesting how they get to know each other. And I'm going to indulge myself and read another paragraph here, because it's a great example of that. I found Lisa one of the most interesting characters. She's so unlikable, and everyone really starts out not liking her, but man, does she win people over in fits and starts. And here, and again, it's a reflection of your interest in beauty, and I think beauty is one of the big themes of the book. The group is talking about these moments of perfect beauty, and everyone's sharing their thoughts on it. And it's sort of Lisa's turn to talk, and someone says, "Or
we should set the scene that she's trying to sleep. She's in the bunk. She's trying to sleep. Everyone else is talking and keeping her up, and they're sharing moments of perfect beauty. She could not possibly care less.
She couldn't care less. All right. So they go, Lisa, no reply. Lisa, come on. You ever had a moment of perfect beauty? And from the bunk came a stream of curses and insults so loud, so profane, but so intricately constructed that all we could do was listen in absolute no kidding awe, like if Notre Dame Cathedral was made entirely of fucks, and it just blasted through the bus, line after line assembled in waves, so breathtaking that it would have made even the best coder in the business kill himself. And it just kept going, rolling and roiling and filling the bus like a big black cloud until we could barely see each other. It was amazing. When she finally stopped, I wasn't sure if we should applaud or bury her in the desert with a stake through her heart to keep her from rising again. Now that, Vaughn said, breaking the silence, that has just become my moment of perfect beauty. And everyone laughed, even Lisa. Well done, Joe.
Yeah, that passage was a lot of fun to write. Yeah, she starts off, well, she's bipolar, and the thing about the journals is that she gets to confess that a little bit, so you see the reason for her behavior and her more outrageous attitudes. And the challenge for that was taking someone who I specifically introduced to not be likable, who would just piss off the characters, to piss off the readers, and by the end of the story, you are rooting for her without changing her at all, just understanding her. And there are times when I just was laughing out loud at some of her behavior. There's a party later on in a apartment at a hotel room, and everyone's laughing at her, and she's like under the table trying to sleep. And just again, just being profane and just being a pain in the ass. And it gets progressively funnier every time she does it. She was a hoot and a half to write, and it's one of my favorite characters, certainly.
That's great. And you know, you bring up that in her case, everyone again has different backgrounds and different reasons for wanting to commit suicide. Hers is her mental illness is a big part of and her suffering because of that, and her lack of control because of it. Someone in the audience is asking about that specifically, and about so many people who have that somewhere in their families or their lives, and they don't have ways to talk about it, or it's not acceptable to talk about it. So first of all, they want to thank you as well for going there into that difficult space, and are asking, you know, is it hard, or like, yeah, was it hard? Is it something you were able to do without reservation, or was there anything you had to overcome to go that far down that path? I've
had a number of people in my life who were bipolar, and I have other mental illness issues. The star of Babylon 5 was having psychological issues. I had other friends who've been through a lot. And again, it's so hard for them to talk about it, because when the person looks at you and you have these issues, they can't see it from the outside. If you walked in and there was an arm missing, they would understand why you couldn't type with both hands. But because you look normal and you sound normal, they think that you're either making it up or they won't listen to your concerns. And again, this book is all about starting conversations. Whenever I've done a TV show, I always think my job is to start bar fights and over large themes. And here I wanted to start conversations about all these things, also to present, again, the different points of view on suicide, where some are more justifiable than others and more understandable than others. Right. Tyler, at this point of the story, has been suffering from this disease of Eisenmenger syndrome for his whole life, and has maybe about, if he's lucky, 6 months to a year to live. And he just he would rather spend that time on a bus with like-minded people than he would in a hospice or a hospital wired up to sensors. That one you can kind of understand. Then you got Peter, who is really, everything is all in his head, and he's a bit of a nihilist, and his reasons for deciding to do this are more political, revolutionary, philosophical than having any real physical issues. And you go, him I really don't agree with, So there are some you can agree with, some you cannot agree with, and play all the different sides to it. Karen is constant pain syndrome. It's called arachnoidal disorder, where the nerves are just firing all the time and you're in constant agony. And again, you can understand it. So I wanted to explore the psychological reasons, the physical reasons, the philosophical reasons, the political reasons, and really take this from every possible dynamic. And so you turn the crystal one way or the other, you can see it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Now, again, another great question from our audience. Because you've known people who have committed suicide, you've had, that's a suffering for sure on you. Was it cathartic to write the book?
To a degree, but I think mainly it was writing out what happened in hopes that it would affect other people and make them understand that. I'll back it up. One of the first love relations I ever had was in college, and she was bipolar and had a lot of issues, and we would get together, fall apart, get together, fall apart. My first great true love. And after all, for years we didn't see each other, and I knew where she was living in San Diego. I hadn't gone there, and about 4 years ago, I guess it was, I thought, okay, I'm in San Diego for Comic-Con. I'm going to go by and see her, and found out as I was getting myself ready to go down that she had taken her own life, and realized, I made the mistake of thinking that there was time, thinking that we are all immortal and there's always tomorrow when we can say the things that matter to us. And there's a lot that I wanted to say to her that I never got the opportunity to say. And my feeling now is, don't wait until tomorrow. Say those things now. The curious thing about that experience, after I got to San Diego, I went anyway. It had always bothered me for many years that I could not call her face to mind. Yeah. And there was a place where I used to meet her, for lunch, and I wait on this little hill, and she would come around the corner of this building, and we would then go off to lunch. And I went back to that same hill in that same area and waited there. And I looked up after like an hour or two, and I could see her coming around the corner of the building in my mind. And I can tell you, I can tell you what she was wearing, the kind of coat jacket she was wearing, the shirt, the blouse, the way she cut her hair. And I can see her as clearly now coming around that corner as I could that day. And God, life is so precious, and life is so fragile. And we all make the mistake of believing that we are immortal and those around us are immortal. And we can't do that. We have to do and say the things we have to do and say now. Don't wait. Those you love, tell them you love them today. Don't wait until tomorrow. Those you miss, call them today. Don't wait until tomorrow, because they may not be here tomorrow.
Yeah, you are so right, and thank you for sharing that. I was thinking that that the book comes out now in the wake of this pandemic is, of course, it's an accident of history, but it feels meaningful in the sense that hopefully many people have learned to treat time and the others in their life a little more preciously when so much gets taken away in a crisis.
I think that's a very good point, and we have now come to a point where a lot of us thought we were going to die. We just, and now we've come through that, and okay, great, we are alive, but now the question becomes, okay, why are we alive, and what are we here to do, and what does it matter that we're alive? I think you're seeing a lot of people questioning their place in the world. That's why you see people not taking up terrible paying jobs, because why do I want to spend my life doing this when I thought I was going to die and I have a second chance now and I don't want to do the crap I did before? Right. And I think that may be also part of the conversation that this book creates.
Right. I want to ask you, and I hope it's not too cheesy, but I love the cover. And I know that sometimes writers have a say in that and sometimes they do. This reminded me kind of the classic books in the 70s, like by Philip Roth or Joseph Heller or something, just sort of you're not gonna get much to go on, although there is a little cat here, and little tweak on the tone there. So yeah, I was just curious, did you participate, or what do you think of it?
Yeah, what's cool about the story is that it lends itself toward more, whimsical covers. This one is a good example of that. The one for the UK release shows a bus moving through the sky in a way that looks very almost kind of silly, but you can see the cat in the very last row, very last seat. The cat figures predominantly in one pickup part of the story, and part of where that came from. I had a cat for 15 years and 3 months named Buddy. And I lost him in the course of writing the book, and he was my best pal, and it just broke me in so many ways. And I had to write out the feelings about that somewhere, and it came out in the book. So that part, oddly enough, was cathartic. Yeah, I love the covers and the fact that there's a certain amount of whimsy to it, which offsets. You turn the book over, suicide cat. So, well, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, and let me just tell folks out there that for all you cat lovers out there, that what Joe is talking about, and the character who has a really special relationship with his cat, it doesn't get any better than this, and nailing the love that some of us have for our feline friends. And I also want to remind people, I think we said it in the chat earlier, but I'll say it again, that when you purchase a book like this from an event, we do have a little extra perk for you tonight, which is that the publisher of the book will be sending anyone who purchases it tonight a signed book plate, signed, of course, by Joe. So do consider getting this, because on publication day, hearing about it so vividly tonight, and hopefully supporting our series and a great independent bookstore here in Minneapolis. If you're not ready to do it today, find an independent bookstore near you, because they are worthy.
And best of all, even though the book costs a few dollars, once you have the autographed version and the actual book plate, you can then use that signature to forge credit card receipts, make fake checks, contracts. You can make a whole lot of money from forgery.
You said it. I didn't. We have someone asking if, given what you've said about your trajectory, and again, I just thought that was so interesting from plot to beauty. Has it changed your process? Do you do anything differently as a writer, given the change in focus in a way?
Well, now my biggest change in process, I first write the consonants, and I go back and I fill in the vowels, and it works really well for me. No, my process really hasn't changed. My process is that I'm just write nonstop. I just, you know, I go from the moment I get up to the moment I crash. The only thing that's really changed in the process over time is that I realize it isn't about me. It's about the story and the characters. And the more it can become like glass, where the story just flows through you and keeps on going, the better the art is, because you're not imposing your will on it. You're just letting it happen. And when I'm behind the computer, my assistant walking by can't see me because I'm just transparent. It's just, you know, I've gotten much more zen about it. That when I first started off, I was trying to claw my way into the story and grabbing it. There's a poem, I can't recall offhand who wrote it. Love will fly if held too lightly. Love will die if held too tightly. Lightly, tightly, how do I know whether I'm holding or letting love go? And the writing process is kind of the same. And I started out holding on really, really tight. You know, I was strangling it. And over time, I've gotten to let it go more and more and more, hold it more lightly. And now I just touch it when I have to. I just let it happen. And that sounds vague, but that's honest to God, that's the truth of it.
Yeah, it sounds true as well. Maybe it's because they came out in such quick succession, but there's a way in which I read this new one, certainly as a companion piece to the memoir, in a way in how they approach such difficult things, but almost as a kind of trilogy of prose here, that of you really kind of expressing these sides of you that, as you said earlier, you know, have to be in this form. They couldn't quite be in a different form that you're associated with. Did you think of these books as any kind of sequence, or is it just a sort of accident of the timetable?
To a degree, it's an accident of the timetable. I hadn't consciously intended that, but I'm also aware that, you know, the clock is not my friend. I am at a point in my life now where the things I had to kind of prove, I've more or less proven. And now looking down the road, you know, 10, 20 years from now, my main concern is not going to be writing a new novel. It's going to be figuring out who stole my pudding. So that's why I want to do the writing book. There's things that I know that I want to convey to upcoming writers, that techniques that they probably couldn't find anywhere else. Then when I get out now, I'm still not non-compos mentis, you know. And I just want to focus now on telling the stories that I want to tell, that I need to tell. And perhaps that need and that desire to say something of hopefully some consequence is a unifying thread between these three books.
There it is. I think you that explains it for me, at least. And boy, I will agree. This is a book of some consequence, but I also want to say of great beauty, incredible pleasure, and serious thought. And for you to combine those so mellifluously for all of us readers is something I'm really grateful to you for, and for spending this time with us. Gonna let you go because I've promised that. And to all of our friends out there, thank you for watching. Please check our website, come back. We have other great author events coming up. Meanwhile, grab a hold of this. You can still do it on screen tonight or through our website at any time. Again, take care, everyone. Tell someone today that you love them or that you miss them. And Joe, thanks again and good night.
Thank you for having me. Good night.